and thanks for joining us on Live with Squacky. I'm Val Kelly, otherwise known as Squacky Voice, and I'm so excited about our show today. We'll be talking with special guest Dan Friedman. Dan is a professional voiceover artist, sound engineer, and the founder of Sound for Voiceover. His voice can be heard on hundreds of local and regional television commercials, radio campaigns, and corporate narrations. Dan has a great ear and is extremely knowledgeable when it comes to demo production, equipment, coaching, and well, I could go on all day about him, but let's dive into my questions. Thanks for joining us today, Dan.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you, Val.
So let's start out by having you tell us about how you got started in the voiceover industry.
Sure. So in 2000, I had just left radio and started managing a studio that specialized in telephony. And I really, even though I had been in radio already, I really didn't make the connection, of, oh, what is voiceover and how did that apply until I started working at a studio that specialized in it. There I met a bunch of voice actors, obviously, some really great people in Atlanta, and ended up taking a workshop and learning how to do this, essentially learning all the founding building blocks and foundational information, and then left Atlanta, started working at a production studio in Asheville, North Carolina, where I live now, and worked there for 13 years as an engineer, as a director and producer. After just a few years of working there, started doing voiceover work myself. And kind of that's the way it's been ever since. And left there in 2014, and I've been on my own since then, here in my lovely home studio.
Nice. That's such a great start. So I don't know if I knew actually that you started out, you said, in Atlanta.
Yeah, in voiceover I did. So as an audio engineer, I actually started in Tampa with that. I was working with bands, doing live sound. And the crazy part about that is, initially I was doing marketing and photography and promo packs, and I was a journalism major for a while in college, and had kind of started applying those skills to promoting bands around Tampa. And one of the clubs that my main band that we worked at this club a lot, and had gigs at this club a lot. The sound engineer was leaving town, and he's like, "Hey man, I've got to go on vacation for a couple of weeks. Do you want to learn how to run sound?" And I'm like, hell yeah, I want to learn how to run sound. And after about 6 months of doing that and actually getting pretty good at it, I was getting compliments. I was working with bands that one of them had a #1 hit on Billboard shortly, as they were actually recording that record while I was working for them. And there was another band that I was working for that also had just gotten signed. It was, I was getting pretty good at it. And then I ended up going to school for it so that I could really learn the foundation of everything that I was, already beginning to apply, but didn't fully understand. So it was great, and did that in Tampa and then Atlanta for a little while, and then continued working in radio during those years as well. I worked for 3 stations, down 2 in Tampa and 1 in Atlanta.
Oh, cool. So for the radio stations, were you doing that as well, or were you doing voiceover work for them?
No, I wasn't. Well, I was on air as kind of like a sidekick to some of the shows because I was doing a lot of the remote broadcasts. I was I was kind of the promotions manager and audio engineer. So I was responsible for setting up ISDN lines in every place in Atlanta and Tampa that we were going to. I was responsible for, getting broadcasts on air. I was mixing live bands to air, including the best one was we did Widespread Panic on New Year's Eve. And I was responsible for making sure that, the feed from the live show made it onto made it onto the air, which was super fun. And we were on stage on New Year's Eve with the band, and having champagne toasts in front of like 4,000 people. It was really cool.
That is really cool. Oh my gosh, that's so exciting. Wow. So this is kind of like branching off a little from my questions that I wrote, but since you talked about ISDN lines, I want to just insert that here as a question. And that's been something that has been sort of like a controversial topic over the years, in the last few years, of ISDN lines. Do you think that people still need them, or can you get away with like Source Connect and things like that?
I think you can get away with Source Connect standard just fine. As a matter of fact, this is really in the last 9 months, I would say, that I'm seeing a lot more auditions coming in that say specifically that Source Connect standard or Source Connect Pro is okay for a remote studio. I mean, you're still seeing, certain places and certain jobs still require that you be on premise. So, wherever that's happening, but more and more I'm seeing that, and seeing less and less like ISDN necessary or something like that. I mean, it's just so hard to get in certain places, or way too expensive.
Yeah.
So I don't really think that it's 100% necessary. Most studios have made the leap to some other form, usually Source Connect, but certainly some of the others. I still hold on to IPDTL for the ISDN bridge capability, which I think
Mhm.
is really good through them.
Yeah.
Um, so, but I don't think ISDN is necessary. Most people are, selling their codecs for doorstops.
Right. What's the difference? Is there a big difference between Source Connect and IPDTL? Like,
Well, those people could tell you for sure, but as far as like on the user side, which is what, most of us are concerned with,
yeah,
the connectivity is pretty straightforward and easy. So it's not really that big it's not really that big of a difference. It's basically, having that contact information, or them having your contact information and just connecting with you. It usually is no more than a click of a button with either.
yeah. I've used Source Connect on a regular basis. I don't think I've used IPDTL that much, but I've definitely learned a little bit, like little snippets about it here and there, like when I've been at conferences and I've met with those people and they've explained it, and said, like, here, have a free trial. I haven't had a chance to actually apply it and use it myself, but I've heard really good things about both of them. So that's cool.
Yeah.
So great. Well, you're a super pro when it comes to all things voiceover, and that's so amazing. When I think about the things I struggled the most with when I started out in voiceover, I think about home studio. Actually, when I first started, hardly anyone had a home studio, so a lot has changed since then. Can you give a few essential tips about home studios that any voice actor, whether new or very experienced or anywhere in between, could benefit from, like essential equipment, soundproofing, etc.?
Sure. Well, I think, really the most important thing to understand, and this is what I think people, especially starting out, tend to overlook or not really want to think about necessarily. I mean, it's sexy to buy gear. It's sexy to buy microphones. It's sexy to buy, things with lights and knobs and all kinds of stuff, right? I mean, that's
Yeah,
the fun stuff, and it's tangible. You can look at it and play with it and all of that. But when you're recording, you're recording two things. You're trying to capture two things with the highest quality possible, and that is the source sound, which in this case is our voices, and the environment in which that source sound exists. So when it comes to home studio, you have to understand that that is the second most important thing in your chain after you.
yeah,
So therefore, it really is so much more important to have your room acoustically treated, and making sure that it's a quiet environment, one that's going to sound professional, because a lot of people try and get into this business before their studio's ready. They've got some equipment because they've been maybe practicing or whatever, and then they start auditioning. And the truth is that when you hear those auditions, first of all, people also have to understand that, when you're out there competing for jobs, you're competing against people that have done this for 30 years, in addition to all the people that have come along the way. So if your home studio sounds like a bathroom or sounds like, a living room, is not treated or anything, it doesn't matter how good you are, because that's what's really separates the pros from the amateurs a lot of times in this case. If if all things were being equal performance wise, the room can definitely make the difference. The environment can definitely make the difference. And
Right.
as we all know, pros who are very capable can still deliver the copy and still sound really good doing it in less than ideal environments, from cars, from uh, you know uh, laptops, and travel situations and things like that, hotel rooms, right? I mean, and it's not that there's those environments are great, or maybe their equipment is not what they would normally use at home, but they know how to use it and they know how to deliver the copy. So therefore, a lot of you know the the competitive nature of it against other people is still not, it's still not apples to apples.
Right.
But yeah, it really is the environment that people have to be concerned with the most after their performance.
Yeah, definitely. So, do you recommend having someone, say you're someone who's starting out or someone who's even been in the industry for a little bit, but you want to improve things? Would you say it's a good idea to have someone come in and do like an evaluation of your space to see if it's a good space or if it should be done somewhere else or if you should look into a sound booth or something like that?
I mean, I don't think anybody who's just starting out should be spending $3,000 to $5,000 on a booth,
Yeah,
because there's a good chance that you might not, or you might discover that this is a lot harder than it seems, and you might not continue with it.
right,
Or you don't understand that it might take a couple of years in them at a minimum to be successful enough to warrant that. I don't think that anybody necessarily needs to come into somebody's house or anything like that. I mean, unless you have money to throw around to do that, then by
right,
all means. But I think, most people who are starting out, they don't necessarily need to spend a lot of money, but they need to make good choices.
right,
Um, Not everybody has a lot of flexibility in where they can put a studio in their homes. I mean, we have to understand it's still a home. It's not a professionally built studio, which is,
right,
takes a lot to make that happen. And it's not necessarily the most reasonable thing to do in your home if you want to sell it, or if you have an apartment or something like that.
right,
So, the most important thing I think is to just stop and listen. Like if you're considering a space, sit in that space and listen, and determine what you hear, and then do that at different times of the day. I say this a lot in when I'm teaching, is that, there's, if you live in a suburban neighborhood, there's a good chance that at 10 or 11 in the morning, it might be quiet enough in your environment that you can record in that space, at least from a soundproofing noise standpoint from the outside world.
right,
But in that same neighborhood, 3:30 in the afternoon, school buses start rolling in, kids start, getting off those buses, screaming and shouting, dogs start barking, like you might be working at that time, right? So,
yeah,
and those are sounds you cannot control. So when you're choosing a space inside your house, if you're talking about just soundproofing to begin with, I mean, mostly people are choosing for acoustics, closets and spaces that make sense,
yeah,
acoustically, at least to start. But where they're not necessarily paying attention to is the noise issues, or they don't know the noise issues because they're so familiar with them because they live in that space.
right,
So the important thing really is to sit in that space and listen, and then, determine what it is that you hear. If you hear a ceiling fan going, or if you hear an air conditioner going, well, you can turn those things off.
right,
If you hear the refrigerator, well, that's a problem. You're
yeah,
probably not going to want to turn off the refrigerator, right? So you have to be aware of the noise that's being created around you first and foremost, and try and eliminate that. If you can control that noise, then by all means, that's, better than in a space you cannot control the noise. And then, next would be, obviously acoustics, and, closets can be really good spaces because you can control the acoustics by what you have in there with you, clothing, blankets, etc. Spare rooms can be good, but, again, it's just a bigger space is great. Like, I love the fact that I have a nice big space to work in. It's very comfortable, and, creatively, it's, I don't feel confined, which is really awesome. But, it takes a little bit more acoustically to get here.
Yeah.
And I actually have a video on my YouTube channel that talks about making acoustic panels. And
Oh,
I
cool.
actually, the acoustic panel that I make in the video, actually, it's one of the two clouds that I have hanging above me right now in this space. Um, and, for those high and mid frequencies, just, thinner, 2-inch thick, generally. And for bass frequencies, it's going to be much thicker, like 6-inch, but the process for building the panels is essentially the same. And much more inexpensive way to go overall if you're the least bit handy than to buy a bunch of acoustic foam that's prefab and all that. You know it's really just what you can afford, and I think that economically it certainly is easier to build your own if you can.
Right, right. Cool. That's so helpful. Thank you.
Sure.
Awesome. I know I always get questions from people about it, and I'm like, let me direct you to someone who can really tell you what they're talking about. you know.
Mhm.
So it's good. Great. So there are so many demo producers today. When it comes to demo production, which you do extremely well, what are some tips you can give to actors not only for how to find the best demo producer for them, but as to what they should have on their demo to make it the best demo possible for today's competitive market?
Yeah, well, variety in your deliveries is the biggest thing. Most people that are listening to demos and do understand, like, a demo is not necessarily the end all be all for everybody. Like, if you're seeking an agent, then yes, you have to have a demo. But that, if all you're doing is working the pay to play sites, then there's a chance that maybe you don't. Or if you're just going to seek out your own clients, then you don't necessarily need a full on demo.
Right,
um, so I think you have to assess whether you even need one based on kind of your goals, and then
right,
also what type of demo. I think as far as the demo producers themselves, I mean, there's a lot of great guys out there that are doing it, and gals. But I think it's about relationships first and foremost. I think that you have to kind of get along with that person, and kind of. I mean, I turned down a lot of work actually, simply because some people are just not my style, that I'm wanting to work with, or that
right,
they aren't doing something that is really interests me.
right,
Um, and I think that, and that's not a personal affront to them or to me. I just want to be able to have a good rapport with them, and to be able to, that we're all on the same page when we're thinking about, how we're going to approach the process. So I think relationships first. I mean, commercials are commercials, and if this is what you do, then ultimately in the end, your demo should definitely sound professional. And I think
right.
that most of the pros that are out there doing that, and I'm not talking about the weekend warrior workshop kind of things. I'm really talking about, we know who a lot of the guys are that are
Yeah,
doing this, and in the end, you're going to end up with a good product. I mean, there's not a lot of, there's not a, the end result will likely be very similar in a lot of ways, in that your best performance is going to be put forward, your voice will be highlighted, in the best way possible, the production will be excellent. But that doesn't, that's it's about relationships.
yeah, I agree. I agree. I definitely think, I mean, like you said, there's a lot of great people out there doing it, and it's and your end result with probably most of those people, it's going to be great. I think what I have experienced recently in people sending me their demos and saying, hey, Val, will you take a listen to this because I just had, I just did this, and that, is that there is a tendency for some of them to be overproduced, in my opinion, and that I think can be kind of a negative thing, but it's difficult when someone sends you a demo and says, hey, can you listen to this and give me feedback? And you want to give them honest feedback, but you also don't want to like be insulting to the person that they had it produced by. You know what I mean? So I'm always like a little bit skeptical to give, any kind of feedback like that just because of that.
I mean, I kind of look at it this way. I'm just, I'm not. I certainly don't want to hurt anybody's feelings, and nobody has to take my word as, the end all be all.
Right,
I'm the performance issues in the demo with somebody who's experienced aren't the issues, right? I mean, it
right.
would be production issues. The music is too loud. The sound effects are overpowering. Those things. I mean, I don't really mind pointing those things out. No
Yeah,
matter who produced it, I'm sure people nitpick at my demos. So it's just a lot of it does come down to subjectivity. I mean, why do a lot of people not get gigs even though they're equally qualified? Well, maybe they sound like the producer's ex-husband or ex-wife. Like, I mean, who knows? So a lot of it is very subjective. I think if you have a good relationship with your demo producer, you have a good rapport with them, you get a good vibe, then everybody is ultimately going for the same goal. And if they get some feedback where some tweaks need to be made, I don't think that that's necessarily wrong.
yeah,
um you know I, I think that in a way it kind of pushes us all to be a little bit better.
right.
Those of us who are doing demos and doing production. I know for me right now, I'm actually, more excited about doing theme based and custom demos that are just interesting. And that's mostly what the projects I'm seeking right now is people who want to do things different,
Yeah,
that people haven't heard before. Like I've got a couple telephony demos on my demo production page that are particularly interesting. I just did a VR demo not too long ago, and I just recently finished another one that's kind of theme based. I actually haven't talked to her to see if I can kind of publicly talk about it yet, but
right.
really fun and just different, and lent itself to good production and good storytelling in addition to the great performance that she gave. So yeah, it's I think that those are the things that you really want to be thinking about. And price, obviously is a factor for a lot of people. I know I'm not super expensive. I know some people are super expensive. It's like microphones. I say, if you're looking in that $300 price range, the kind of world of microphones opens up to you, because there's a lot of great microphones that you're not going to hear $700 worth of difference between the $300 one and the $1,000 one.
Right,
Well, it's kind of the same difference when you're talking about paying, $1,500 or $2,000 for a demo versus $3,000 or $4,000. You're really
right,
getting $2,000 worth of difference. I don't
right,
know. Only you can decide that because you're the one spending the money.
right.
Um, so that's just one of those things.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. It's definitely something. I do think price is definitely a factor for a lot of people, because I feel like the price just keeps going up and up and up. And then, the trend has been, I don't know if it's changing again. I'm sure it's changing again, but the trend has been, to have a demo for each different genre of voiceover that you're trying to book, and it's like people have so many demos, and I'm like, that's awesome that you're doing well enough to pay, $2,500 or $3,000 for each demo that you're doing. That's crazy to me. Like, just simply for the fact that like I still don't feel that you need to have a demo for each separate thing. But then again, I'm not seeking to do 20 different types of voiceover. So I think that it just kind of depends on the person individually as to what they're looking to do with it, to make themselves more versatile and book more different types of work.
Yeah, I mean, I know in my own situation, like I don't even really try for animation work because I don't live in a market that it's conducive to that. I mean,
Right.
kind of have to be on location. So, I have a character demo. It's really old. I haven't updated it in like 10 years.
Yeah.
Because I just don't go for that kind of work. I mean, I think that it should be something that is, something that I display or show that I'm capable of when those things come around. But if I'm auditioning for an animated job of some kind or a cartoon character or an animated, usually it's animated characters in commercials, and 9 out of 10 times it's probably a dog. Um,
Yeah.
and I get those rules anyway if I'm going to you know
Yeah.
I usually will get that role if I was going to get it at all. I got it, and if I
Right.
wasn't, then I wasn't. I don't need a demo for it.
Right.
I think it's really more important to be laser focused on what you do well,
Right.
than it is necessarily to kind of just throw a bunch of things at the wall and hope something sticks.
Right. Exactly. I totally agree. And that's why, it's having two or three demos, I think is a great idea. Like that's just my personal opinion on it. Having two or three really great demos of what you're, like you said, laser focused on doing. And then, everything else is just like they should be able to get that ability out of your kind of more, I mean, commercial and your narration demo, if you have those, you can demonstrate a lot on those, and then like if you're going to do a character and animation demo because that's what you want to do, then obviously that's essential to have, but it's like everything else can kind of be it's not like it's a compilation demo like it used to be way back in the day, but you can still demonstrate those skills in those other demos. And if a producer's, a director, whoever, casting director is listening to it, they should be able to pull out of that, like, hey, this person is definitely got a sound I'm looking for. And then they send you an audition and then you prove that you can do it. And then that's how you're going to book the work.
I mean, you would definitely hope so. Clients themselves tend to lack a little bit of imagination because they're only focused on, hearing their name and hearing, what it is that they're looking for as far as, you know, genre, or industry or whatever it is, right? They kind of lack imagination in that way.
Right.
However, casting directors and agents, they hear this stuff all the time, so they know a lot better. And usually that's who your demo is for anyway.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, clients typically are not, they're not really asking, to hear your demo necessarily, because if they've made it that far to where they're asking, they know you already somehow, or you've introduced yourself to them or whatever it is. Right. And,
Right.
but it's, demos are largely for agents and for casting directors and those people who are already in the know and don't necessarily lack that imagination.
Right. Exactly. And I think I think it's becoming more and more an industry of people doing direct marketing to clients. I think there's a lot more of that happening because of social media, which we'll talk about in more detail later. But those are all kind of interesting things for people to think about is the direct marketing possibility and reaching out to clients directly, making those connections on LinkedIn and other places like that, where you're kind of not necessarily going around your agent, but you're still able to make those connections with people, and you don't necessarily have to have a demo because they're going to send you a script and say, hey, can you do this for me? And that's sort of your sample for them. So I think that's really an interesting way to book work as well.
Yeah, quite possibly. I think that, like I say, if you're already in those conversations with those people, then they kind of know you and they're, more willing to give you a shot specific to what they do.
Right.
Um, and, if you are doing, theme or kind of, like I said, really creative, kind of specific demos. It's like, for instance, this demo that I was kind of not mentioning, but not fully mentioning, that I just did, it was theme based, but it's still like a commercial demo, I mean, it just happens to be centered around a theme that this talent really loves,
Right.
and she's just really, and it was really exciting and fun to do. But it still gives a great demonstration of everything that she does. It's just centered around a theme.
Yeah, that's a really cool idea. I like that. That must be really fun to work with someone like that.
I love it, because it just, I've always tried to be somewhat of an innovator, I guess, when I put things out there, or I try to do something that just maybe people haven't seen before or heard before, or just try and come up with some sort of new idea
Yeah,
that's different. Sometimes that's effective and other times it's a total bust, and that's okay because we learn from our failures. But nonetheless, I think that's it. Just really lends itself to making the process fun and not the same old thing.
yeah,
And it's the true for the people who are listening too. I mean, I can't tell you when I was casting and adding talent to my talent roster for the production company. I mean, it was, I heard 30, 40 demos a week easy, and it was one of those situations where it's like, oh, that again,
right.
so to hear something different is always kind of exciting.
Yeah,
And kind of really makes you, at least put you in the folder of, I'm going to listen to that one a second time. And that's really where you want to be. The more second time folders you get into, or
yeah,
second listen folders you get into, the better off you are, because you're just that one step closer.
absolutely. You want to be in the second listen folder.
That's
I
right.
like that. That's cute. Good. Well, let's switch gears a bit and talk about goals. So, what are three goals that you have for yourself in your voiceover career for 2019?
Well, I've been pretty fortunate in that since going out on my own, my business continues to grow year after year. And that is this past year, I can't say that I'm the best record keeper. I kind of know what's going on, but I don't know it to like the last dollar or the last, penny necessarily. But this is like the first year I was just like, wow, this is really working. Like I've been on my own and it's really working. Like this
That's
is
awesome.
good. And it's not that it wasn't before. It's just that I just felt it.
Right.
So that's my goal. That's really the biggest goal, is to have it continue to grow. And I'm already on track for that for this year. So I'm really happy about that. And the other goals are, they're kind of business related, but not necessarily. Like, I mean, to continue to have, time freedom, to manage my time in a way that is, in demand, but not overwhelming, to where I still have time for my family. And I mean, my kids, they're teenagers right now. I have an Eagle Scout who just became an Eagle Scout in March. And my other son besides being in scouting, is also the first chair baritone sax player in middle school for the state of North Carolina. So
Wow.
I'm really trying to facilitate their success.
Hmm.
Um, and that's, with scouts and, my older son, who the Eagle Scout, is also in early college. So his schedule is not like a normal high school schedule or a college schedule for that matter. So, I need to have the time to get them where they need to be, which is, get them their driver's licenses that I don't have to do that much longer. I mean, that's really, the most important, goal, is, certainly having enough income, but also having time, because it's not really always about money. And then thirdly is having the time for myself to do creative things. I actually, I just started about a month ago, am taking singing lessons. And it turns out that I'm not too bad at it. So,
Nice.
um, that, and there's a lot of a lot of parallels to what we do in voiceover that relate to that. And it really is so astounding to me. Like my instructor will bring things up and I'm just like, that's exactly what I teach in voiceover or have been teaching in voiceover. Right. So bringing in these other creative outlets for myself, just so that I can continue to also flourish without having to be so laser focused on voiceover all the time. I mean, I've been doing this for 20 years almost. So, there's, it's nice to have some other things to think about. uh,
Yeah.
and that also feed this voiceover beast,
Yeah.
creatively.
Yeah, absolutely. That's great. That's so awesome that you're taking singing lessons. I've thought about doing that. I mean, I love singing, so I kind of sing anyway, whether I'm like really professionally trained or not. Um, but I think it's very valuable for people to do that in whatever type of voiceover that they're doing, because it
Oh
can
my
really
goodness.
help you with your vocal training overall. Singing is so great for that. So yeah,
Acting lessons, improv. I've done them all now, and
yeah,
I did all of them for a couple of years.
yeah.
And when I am coaching, I bring a lot of those things that I've learned into it, and the same with the singing. I actually sang with a band for the first time
Oh, that's cool.
on Monday. It was crazy cool. I really enjoyed it. Not really in front of an audience, but nonetheless, um, that'll maybe be next. I don't know that I'm gonna be doing karaoke, because karaoke is still something that I really don't care for very much. But I'd sing with a band. But anyway, all these just creative pursuits, that they really lend to what we do, because we are ultimately, artists in addition to technicians, in a way. And we have to be able to feel free to be ourselves, because let's face it, it's really about being believable. So if we're, in our own space and we're creating, to the best of our ability, then it's really going to come out. And any creative pursuit really helps with that, especially when they directly feed what we do, from acting, improv, singing, all that stuff. And for those who are not engineers or production people, play around with your DAWs, just try and add some music. I'm not saying, make a demo. No, you should not make your own
No,
demo, but
don't make your own. No,
don't
don't do
don't do that.
it.
But what I am saying is, there's a lot of things that you can do in your with your audio gear that are creative and fun, and play around with that too.
Yeah, that would actually be like a cool, I'm sure you can already take these classes, but like a class, a workshop on how to, for people that are not technologically savvy, um, a little workshop on how to like add music and add sound effects to your work, because some people don't know how to do that. So that would be a really cool thing to have, a little workshop on that so that people can kind of figure it out. Not so that they can go home and make their own demos. I don't mean it for that. I just mean like just to have the knowledge, a little bit more background on how to do that. I'm sure it's already out there. I'm just saying I think it's a cool idea.
Yeah, the hard issue
Yeah.
with that is, is that everybody, especially in what we do, they're all using different types of DAWs, so
Right.
you're often wanting to, like, for instance, I know people love Adobe Audition. I look at that and I'm just like, yeah, I can't work in that.
Right.
um, because I'm just so comfortable in the environment that I am, that I've been using.
Right.
And if I sat and I spent the time with Adobe Audition and configured it to look like I want it to look like and all of that, I'm sure it wouldn't be a problem to pick up, everything that I need to pick up to be totally functional in it. But,
Right.
I don't necessarily have that kind of time to do that. So that is one of the limitations, with that. But creatively speaking, you know, as long as you have the ability to have more than two tracks, you can really still play around. I mean, you can even do that in Audacity. It's clunky and annoying, but you
Mhm.
can do it.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I'm not a super fan of Audacity just because it was like the first thing that I ever used, and I just had a lot of trouble with it as far as editing went. But I know that a lot of people use it and they're fine with it. I think there's some, in my personal opinion, there's some better programs out there, but
Yeah.
like it's just everybody what they are comfortable with, so they have to just use whatever is right for them.
Yeah, well, the nice thing with most EAWs is, you learn one, and then generally speaking, it's not necessarily a huge stretch to go to another. That's a
Right,
better, especially, Audacity is, it's free. It's a bit
right,
clunky. It's not really the best program for learning sound
right.
necessarily, but it certainly can be a good training ground for moving on to something better, and that's going to allow you to be more efficient and give you greater capabilities.
So what do you recommend? Like, what do you use? Do you use Pro Tools or you use something
I
else?
use Cubase. And I've used Cubase and its sister program Nuendo from Steinberg. I've used them for pretty much my entire career at this point. I used
Oh,
Cool
cool.
Edit in the early days. Um, and between Cool Edit and standing in front of a mixing board in front of hundreds of people, while they're waiting for to happen, those two things basically allowed me to look at Nuendo or Cubase and say, okay, I get that. I get how that works. I understand the signal flow from the board, the mixer. I understand the editing from Cool Edit. So I can go ahead and now I can work with this and, make it my own and master it in my, for what I need.
Cool.
So that, but when I went to recording school, we learned on tape. I was
Yeah.
that we didn't we had one brand new computer at the school at the time, 1995, and they said, well, we think this might be the next big wave in audio, and you can do this you can edit on your computer. You can see the waveforms. It was like amazing. And of course that program later became Pro Tools.
Oh, cool. That's neat. Yeah, that's really good. That's interesting. That's so interesting. There's so much stuff out there. There's so many different programs you can use, and it's really just you can get totally confused if you're not sure what to do. It's
Yeah.
yeah,
It's really about, being quick. The editing to me is the most boring, most monotonous, mundane part of the job. So
yeah,
like you want something that you can do that quickly and efficiently.
exactly.
So it's merely a tool to get that done. And then, hopefully all the creativity comes from everything else that you do with it.
Right. Cool. So, as a dad, husband, sound engineer, demo producer, voice actor, et cetera, how do you find time to maintain balance in your busy life?
I make it. It's just that simple. I just make the time, I mean, they come first, their schedule is more important than mine. It just has to be,
Right.
um, to facilitate their success. I'm going to be old someday and not be able to maybe take care of myself, and I'm aware of that. So I want kids that, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to take care of them so that they'll treat me pretty well when I'm old.
Nice, nice.
I guess that's kind of my philosophy on it. And I'm kind of course, half joking about that, but only half joking.
Only half. Yeah. Yeah, definitely family first is really important. It is tricky to balance time with all the stuff going on. That's something I really struggle with all the time because I always have so many things going on, like teaching and running a company and being a voice actor and a mom and a wife and everything. It's like a lot of stuff,
Sure.
Um, but I think that what I've done in the last year or so is just really try to find time for myself to try to meditate and just try to like recenter what my real goals are and things like that. And I think that sometimes when people get to the point where they're like, my gosh, I have all these, balls in the air. I don't know what to do with them. I'm either going to drop them all or I have to, you know, take a step back and reevaluate where I am with my life and what I want to make my priorities. And for me, just like for you, family comes first and then everything else is after that. Even my teaching job and all of that, everything comes, I mean it's right up there with my family being important because it's a job and it's important and providing for them. But at the same time, it's like my daughters are 8 and 11 now, so it's more stuff going on. The older they get, the more stuff they get involved in. So it's like,
Oh
okay,
yeah.
yeah. So
Yeah.
it was
I mean, I think that, and certainly this is probably true in most careers, but certainly this one as well. And it's only harder for, entrepreneurs of any kind. Sometimes you do have to take a step back and kind of evaluate what success looks like to you.
yeah,
Success looks like something different to everybody. And sometimes, that's not always necessarily what it is that you are. It's not necessarily your business, it's
right,
not necessarily your business that has to take that priority, or that you have to reevaluate what success looks like in that business so that you can, kind of live the life you want to live. Um, and that's not always about, making more money. It's just not,
right.
even though that's hard to say sometimes, and for some people may be hard to hear. But I think it's really important to be kind to yourself and be patient with yourself and understand that, success is different for everybody, and you got to evaluate what that looks like to you.
Yeah, definitely. So let's see. What are you working on now? That you've told us a little bit, but what are you working on now that you're excited about and allowed to talk about that you'd like to share with us?
Yeah, so they should start airing this month, but I'm the national voice for a restaurant chain that has restaurants. They're not in every single state, but they are in enough states that it's a national, and they're spread out across the country, called Village Inn. And I know that they had them in Tampa when I lived down there. So, yeah, that's pretty exciting. And I recently did a narration for uh, a golf event that aired on CBS, like a charity event. I narrated that, so that was another national, exposure type gig.
Cool.
Um, Other than that, it's kind of just my regular stuff, and then of course get doing demos for people that are creative. So if you want to do a creative demo, something different, you can call me. Um, yeah, that's pretty much what's going on.
That's so cool. That's really exciting to have national spots. I'm sure like that so much exposure and that's really cool. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's been a little while since I did a national. So I was, one year I had like three going all at the same time, which was really cool. So it's been a little while since I've had a national exposure spot. I've done a lot of regional and local and stuff like that.
Yeah.
A lot of corporate stuff, but to have another national campaign is, I mean, it's always, kind of the goal of commercial work for sure.
Yeah, definitely. So what's the best, I love this question. What's the best piece of advice you've received since starting in the voiceover industry?
The best piece of advice. Um, Gosh, I don't know what the best piece of advice is that I've gotten. I mean, I've certainly read a lot, and it usually has nothing to do with voiceover books,
Yeah.
or voiceover stuff. It's just kind of like living your life, and kind of um, understanding that, you have to. Uh, I kind of spoke about it already, really evaluate what success looks like for you and
Right.
be accepting of how that is going to go. Cause not everybody is, has the same opportunities or is in the same places. I mean, obviously,
Right.
we all know that kind of stuff. So, just really being patient with yourself, being kind to yourself. This is a very, it can be very difficult to do this. You get rejected constantly. You got to have kind of a thick skin for that.
Mhm.
And just that would really be it. Just being accepting and patient and kind to yourself. I would say that's more important than any advice as far as the actual job goes. I'd say that's more of like life advice.
Yeah. How about the worst advice? you've received or read or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, the worst advice. So, and I know the intentions were certainly good, and I don't, fault anybody for, having given me this advice at one point. But I had an app for a while, and that cost me a ton of money, and it did nothing for me. So, while well-intentioned advice, that's if I had any regret about, things that I've tried in marketing, that would be the most expensive thing that I have done that yielded no results.
Yeah. Well, I think, there was kind of like, I feel like there was kind of a trend for a little while where everyone was like, you should have your own app for blah, 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 whatever, and everyone was like, yeah, I need to have my own app for this or that or blah, 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 blah. And then, it was like, okay, yeah, there are certain things you definitely need an app for, and there are so many, but I feel like that trend has also sort of died down a little bit.
Yeah,
Maybe
well,
like after,
websites are so so phone mobile friendly now
yeah,
that
exactly.
and that's the thing. So that was, that's the one area that I definitely spent more money than I should have. um,
Right.
a lot more money than I should have.
Lesson learned the hard way. We've
That's
all done it. We've all done it. Like, I,
exactly.
I feel like this life just keeps throwing more and more lessons at you. And if you learn them the first time, then hopefully you won't make the same mistake again. So, yeah, that's unfortunate that that happened. But, it's, if you've learned from it, it's a good thing. Maybe
Absolutely.
not financially a good thing, but it was a good thing that you learned a lesson from it.
I
Right?
learned something from it. I learned something from it.
Yep. All right. So, what is your favorite genre of voiceover to book and why?
I like radio imaging and concert promo stuff. That's the kind of stuff that like really gets me fired up because first of all, just having been in the music industry and radio and stuff like that, so that's really exciting to me. It's creative. It's the production is awesome. So that kind of stuff is really that's my favorite to book. That's not what I book most. I mean, I definitely
Right.
book commercial stuff most, and
Hmm.
I love commercial work. I have certainly no reservations about any of that. But as far as what's fun, that's the stuff that's fun for
Yeah.
sure. And it's so different. I mean, on the one hand, you can be like, I'm totally hip guy promoting your radio station. On the other hand, you can be real gritty and tough, or just, hey, what,
Yeah.
I mean, you get a lot more opportunity for that stuff on kind of a consistent basis
Right.
because, that doesn't change as much. Whereas, in a commercial, it's possible you're going to just kind of be booked for what you're known for or be booked in your kind of, your lane.
Right. Right. Exactly. A little bit more typecast
Yeah.
for commercials. Yeah, I got it. That's cool. Um. So let's see. As far as being a voiceover coach, can you tell us a little bit about your style of coaching?
Yeah, absolutely. So, first of all, I tell everybody right off the bat, especially if you're just starting in this, that you can expect that this may take a couple of years. I hope I can say that. Well, of course I can say this. The FCC isn't going to come down on me, right? I don't bullshit people. I just don't. I mean, if you're just starting out, this is going to take you a while. Especially if you don't have any related experience, either in broadcasting or acting or whatever, right?
Right.
um, I mean, I just tell it like it is, and I'm kind and nice about it, but I don't bullshit people. That's first and foremost. So I'm never somebody who says, oh, you'll get a few lessons and we'll make you a demo and, you'll be off and running, make $1 million. Well, let's
Right.
face it, that just doesn't happen. That's
Hmm.
unrealistic. And people that promote themselves that way to other people, I feel that's disingenuous.
Yeah.
I think that this is a very difficult road to travel. It's very competitive. It's very challenging, and you have to be good in order to succeed, and that takes time. The bottom line is, it's like anything that's kind of artistic or creative. No matter what it is, you have to learn the foundations of that first, the technical foundations.
Right.
So I always teach the technical side of it first. There's more ways to emphasize a word than just making it louder.
Hmm.
There's those kind of technical things that you must know about a script and how it functions. And then after you learn that technical stuff, I kind of make the analogy of being a carpenter. You are a beginning carpenter, you have an empty tool belt. My job is to give you those tools and to show you how to use them. It's not until you as an individual uses those tools as often and as frequently as possible to learn that to the point where it becomes very second nature to pull that tool out of your tool belt and use it. It's not until that becomes second nature that you can actually start getting creative in your use of those tools.
Right.
It's not that you can't be a little creative along the way, but at the same time, it's like the other analogy would be like, you got to learn the rules before you can break them.
Right.
Things like that. So I'm very adamant, and this is, very true. My singing instructor and I were just talking about this recently. It's basically, when you have the technical foundation built in, when you have that structure built in, then you can be creative and the technical stuff doesn't go away. It's not like that's going away. It becomes the foundation that allows you to be free and creative without the important stuff really disappearing. It actually reinforces it, and you just use those tools with more fluidity and comfort and ease. And the best part about it is you get to stop thinking about those things. When
Yeah.
you get very proficient at using them, you get to stop thinking about them because they're there and you're going to
Right.
use them. That foundation is built.
Awesome. Yeah, that's really great advice. And I think it's really important to be a coach that is upfront and honest with their students, because if you're not, then it's you're giving people a false sense of how good or not they are. You know what I mean? Like, they need, not everyone is going to be successful in the voiceover industry, even though it might be something that you really love. Without the proper training, and if you just don't have the talent for it, then it's not something that everyone can actually do. So I think it's really important to be upfront and honest and teach people those techniques and the foundation that they need to really decide, am I going to be successful at this? If it's truly in your heart and soul, like it's what you love more than anything, then by all means, like, give it every last ounce of energy you have to give it your best shot, and just kind of see where it goes.
Well, in
But
all honesty, I think in this day and age, probably more than ever, you have to love it that much.
oh yeah.
Have to love it. You have to give it that time commitment that it deserves. Because if you think about it, those of us who've been doing it a long time and are established in the industry in any way, we're doing it all the time, like every day, for
Mhm.
hours in some cases. And if you're just new and you're just starting out and you can't commit an hour to practicing every day, then everybody else is just getting continuously better than you, you
Right.
know?
Right.
It's like I specifically give my students homework that I tell them they must do at least an hour a day,
Yeah.
5 days a week, because if you can't make that time commitment to it, then do understand that those of us that you will be competing against ultimately are putting in far more time and have already put in far more time. I mean, I think I calculated it once, I've probably put in like 40,000 hours to this, you
Yeah.
know, some ridiculous amount, so if you think about that, and if you're not willing to commit, if you don't love it enough to commit an hour a day to doing nothing but practicing just for the sake of getting better, then you probably don't love it enough to really compete, in this day and age. And that's
Yeah.
okay. Like, go do something else, go
Right.
Like nobody's forcing you to become a voice actor.
Right.
And you're not going to be saving lives. There's far more important things that people can be doing. But if you love this and you love it, like you need it like oxygen, I get that. And then by all means you should put your heart and soul into it, but you must practice, you must get coaching, you must learn the things. You don't know what you don't know.
Right.
And if you're just starting out, then that's really important that you learn those things, and then you can continue and hopefully be successful.
Absolutely. And I think that once you have some really good coaching and a strong, strong foundation of where you're trying to go with it, you can't stop getting coaching, even if you've, been working in the industry for a long time. So, I mean, I've been in the industry for a long time, on and off a little bit since 1999, because simply for the fact that when I started, it was a very, like, not a lot of people were doing voiceover that you like heard about. You know what I mean? So it was more like the only people you heard about doing voiceover were like people based in LA that I heard about because I grew up in upstate New York. And so when I started taking voiceover classes, it was very much a scenario of like, hey, come and take these 6 weeks of classes and then let's do your demo. And I've told this story like a billion times, so I apologize to everyone that's already heard it 1,000 times before. But I think it's really relevant because the industry has evolved so much over those years that I've been kind of in it, trying to get my foot in the door, taking a few years off to try to figure out what the hell I'm doing. And then coming back into it in 2011 and really going at it full force 100%, and had a lot of great successes and some pretty huge failures, and just, but it's what I love. So even if it's me continuing to get coaching from people and practicing every day in whatever capacity I'm practicing, whether it be doing interviews with people, whether it be in my studio for a couple of hours practicing animation scripts, whether it's writing my own show, whether it's, whatever. There's so many different outlets that you can bring into it. It's such a time that we're living in where you can create your own content. And I think that's so important for people to realize is that, practicing and doing your homework is not always necessarily even being in front of the microphone, although that's definitely important because you have to be in front of the microphone to figure out how far away should I be from it, how close should I be, how is this going to sound, how's my space sounding, all of that. But for me, it's been adding in other things as well. So I think that that's, for me, a lot of my practice comes from other stuff that I'm doing that is all related to voiceover. So
Well, and for me personally, I mean, that's kind of it too. Like, I'm an industry professional. I'm not just a voice actor. I don't, and I don't rely on that just alone for my income either. Like, I am an industry professional. I provide lots of services, from production to coaching to voiceover to, I mean, I do lots of things for the industry. And,
yeah,
that's the other thing is, for unless you're like kind of that very special 10%, or whatever, that maybe it's even less than that, that all you have to do is voiceover,
right.
then you're pretty fortunate. But that's not most people.
No, it's
That is
not.
not
Yeah,
most people in this industry. That's a small group by comparison to the entire field. So and not only that, but if you think about that, um, the voicing part is still a very small percentage of what they do to make that living, to have that career. They still have to market, they still have to reach out to people, they still have to do all their networking and things like that, right? I mean, ultimately, our job is to get the job. And that's really what we do. We do everything that we can, to get more jobs. And that takes 95% of our time compared to the 5% we actually are in front of a microphone performing. Uh,
yeah.
and that's just really, pretty important to understand, because, the rest of the stuff is not really the fun part, but it is the grunt work. It is the stuff that you have to do in order to get the job.
Absolutely. Yeah, definitely. The marketing and the making, networking and reaching out to people, all of that is so important. And um, before we get to my social media question, I want to talk about what do you think your biggest successes have been in the industry so far?
Well, I mean, I think, writing my book was by far, the most important thing that I've done. Um, so, sound advice, voiceover from an audio engineer's perspective, little plug there, available at my website, sound, the number
Awesome.
four, vo.com. Sorry. Um, but yeah, I think that, certainly by far that is the most important thing that I've done in the industry for both myself and I think for a lot of other people. And I don't say that, I mean, people have told me that it has, really changed their lives in the voiceover world as far as their home studio and stuff like that. So that feels good, you know, that I've helped people, and it's certainly, doing so helped me. So that is by far the biggest, success industry wise. I mean, obviously national campaigns, as far as the actual VO work goes, that's the cool stuff and the fun stuff.
Yeah.
And always the kind of thing that it's nice to kind of brag about, I guess,
Yeah.
which I actually don't do very much of. I don't really brag on myself. I try not to do that at all, really.
Well, that's so cool. So everyone should read Sound Advice, and like Dan said, you can get it on his website at soundforvo.com. So I'll put a link to that in the description of this video.
Sweet.
Um, so what about obstacles? What have some of your biggest obstacles been?
Yeah, obstacles. I mean, I don't really, nothing's really stood in my way. It's always me that I stand in my own way,
Right.
largely. I mean, there certainly, things that we tell ourselves, and those are the things that, are the real obstacles, the stuff that we hold ourselves back from, which actually is one of the things why I'm enjoying singing lessons so much, because it's always something that I told myself, you can't really do that. You're a this side of the mic kind of guy, you know, but I don't believe that anymore. I feel like I'm going to try that. Like, why not? I understand that. I understand, what a stage environment is like. I mean, I've experienced it. I have close to 25 years of experience understanding what that world is like, and there's no reason why I can't work any side of it if I want to. If I put in the time, the effort, and dedicate myself to it, there's no reason why I can't do any of that. The only reason I didn't become a musician earlier in my life is really because I didn't have the patience. I'm an impatient person kind of by nature. Like, I'm always like, I want it today,
Right.
but that's probably, as a life lesson, that's one of the things that this industry has probably made me learn more than anything, is that, and I've been saying this now for several years, it's a crock pot career. It's not a microwave meal.
Yeah.
So that's probably one of the best things that has come out of it as a life lesson, is just, you can't really be impatient in this business.
Right.
It is a slow grind, to be successful. And that's just the reality of it. There seems like there may be a lot of overnight successes out there. Well, it takes 10, 15 years sometimes to become an overnight success, at any,
Yeah.
as most people in creative fields will tell you. So that's, I don't really consider things like obstacles, as much as, I mean, there's nothing that really can't be overcome with dedication and time, and, as long as you have your wits about you.
Right. Cool. Good. So you've been our sound tech guy for the Mavo Mid-Atlantic Voiceover Conference for the past few years, in partner with Sennheiser, who's been our exclusive technology sponsor for the past few events, as is evident in your t-shirt.
That's right.
Way to promote there. So you've seen firsthand how the event is run. So, and like what happens, the ins and outs, the content of the event. as you know, our next conference is coming up on November 6th through 8th of 2020. So
Am
can you
I
describe?
invited?
Absolutely,
Oh, okay.
absolutely.
I just had
Of,
to check.
of course. Um, so can you describe your experience with Mavo and how it's been? And that's in case anyone watching or listening would like to attend.
Yeah, absolutely. So I love it. I have a good time when I'm there, and I love coming to DC. Strangely enough, DC causes me a lot of stress when I think about it, but at the same, like as a city, and what goes on there. But as a city to visit, I absolutely love it. It's actually a lot of fun for me, and I love going to museums and things like that. But as far as Mavo is concerned, um, it's just, kind of the intimacy of it all, which is really nice. I mean, obviously you have a lot of choices. People have a lot of choices when it comes to going to conferences and things like that. And I think that all of them lend themselves to different aspects of your career and different learning opportunities. How you choose to learn for yourself and how you best take in information really matters. And you kind of have to know yourself a little bit as to what is going to be more beneficial to you. Do you want to be in a big crowd, and, have lots of opportunities, lots of different opportunities to where you can, where it's almost like overwhelming in making your decisions? Or do you want something a little bit more intimate where you know exactly what you're going to get, how you're, and you don't have to be overwhelmed?
Right,
Again, it's like I kind of said earlier, in demand but not overwhelmed. That's kind of that's kind of how I want to be,
right,
in demand but not overwhelmed, to where I can, make solid choices and still honor my own, freedom and all that. And Mavo definitely is the more intimate, to where you can get kind of more individual learning, and things like that, to where it doesn't necessarily cost you like a ton of extra money, or even a little extra money. I mean, you just get a little bit more intimate environment to where you can spend a little bit more time one-on-one with people, compared to a lot of other conferences,
yeah,
whether in this country or other countries, I guess,
exactly.
because it's all international now.
Absolutely. That's great. Well, I'm glad you've had a good experience. Of course, we'd love to having you as our technical slash sound person slash guest speaker slash a whole bunch of other stuff. And we would, of course, love to have you back in 2020 because it's
Well,
been
I'll put it on my calendar.
put it on your calendar, absolutely. And yeah, well, that would be great to have you back. Um, so, is there anything else that you would like to highlight or talk about before we end our session?
Um, just, like I say, if you've got something creative in the audio voiceover production world that you want to work on, as far as, making a demo or getting coaching or things like that, I'm here for you. Just send me an email, dan@sound4vo.com. That's the number 4. uh, and reach out, because you may not see me on social media that much. um, but nonetheless, I'm very interested in talking about, doing creative projects and creative demos, and coaching as well. I think I have a very solid, coaching program for myself, and I call it a program only because what the hell else am I going to call it? I guess a structure, that will teach you the foundation and the basics, the same things that I learned 20 years ago when I took my first voiceover class, all those tools to fill your tool belt. And then beyond that, giving you those tools so that you can use them creatively and effectively to book work. And so feel free to reach out for that. And I will end the same way I always end most things that I do. And I don't mean to be cliche, but, there's three things that you need in this business. First, be good at what you do. Second, be somebody who other people like to work with and want to work with. And lastly, work for good rates. Don't bring down the industry with your lowballing and, undercutting.
Absolutely. Well, thanks so much for your time and for being on the show today. Everyone, you can find Dan at and send Dan an email at dan@sound4vo.com, and I'll put the link in the description of this video. And like I said, thanks again for joining us and for all the valuable information that you provided. And we hope to see you at NAVO 2020, if not before then. And
Absolutely. I look forward to being there.
yeah, thanks for watching, everyone.
Thanks, Val. Thank you, everybody.